Right, we're going to begin. Good evening, panel speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Economic Society of Singapore's first webinar series. I'm Denon, and I'll be your host for today. Before we begin, please kindly take note of the following. Kindly mute all your microphones. Kindly post your questions on the Q&A on your upper right-hand corner. You may also vote or give a thumbs up for the questions you feel are relevant towards you. If your question is specific to any panelist, kindly mention the panelist's name. We'll be taking a group webinar photo at the end of the session, so please do turn on your cameras and give us your brightest smile. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed not just our daily routines, but also created a new normal in Singapore. As Singapore navigates through a scarred and challenging economic landscape, what is the new normal and how do we strive in it? ESS is honored to have our distinguished panel speakers with us today to share with us on their insights on the new normal and evolving economic situation. Hence, without further ado, let me introduce today's moderator, Mr. Manu Bhaskaran, Director of the Sentinel Group International, Founding Director and CEO of Sentinel Asia Advisors and Vice President of ESS. Mr. Manu, please.
Thank you, Denon. And hello, everyone. Thank you for making time to join our webinar. As Danon said, that the pandemic has really upended a lot of what we have been used to. We've had the sharpest economic contraction in close to 100 years, in almost 90 years. And many trends that were underway before the crisis in geopolitics, in economics, in technology, in business model changes all seem to be accelerating and therefore creating a new, what is called a new normal. Of course, some people feel that this question of a new normal has been a bit hyped up. So there's a bit of a debate going on. But for Singapore, this is very important, not just because we have an election campaign going on, but also because we are a very small economy. And in order to survive in a rapidly changing world, we need to be ahead of the curve. We need to know better than others what shape the global environment is going to take and how it's going to affect us. So we're very privileged today to have a number of very good people who've agreed to take some time off their very busy schedules to share their insights with us. You've already got their biographies in the flyer that was sent out, but let me just very quickly give a very short introduction. We have first Ms. Tan Bin Ru, who is currently the Chief Executive Officer for Southeast Asia of OneConnect Financial Technology, which is listed in the New York Stock Exchange and is associated with China's gigantic Ping An Insurance Group. Then secondly, we have Xin Wei, who is Head of Marketplace and Economics at Grab. Thirdly, we have Tan Yin Lan, who is the founder of Insignia Ventures Partners and has been a widely respected commentator on trends like this. And finally, rounding up everything is Jonathan Tan, who is a behavioral economist specializing in strategic decision making, and he's with NTU. So what we'll do is we'll have the comments from each of the speakers, starting with Bin Ru and then Xin Wei, Yin Lan, and Jonathan. And then we'll open up to discussion. And I hope that all of you will prepare questions or comments that can help spice up the discussion. So let's get straight into it. And can I ask Bin Ru to share with us her insights into this whole question of the new normal? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me in this ESS forum. First, I'll maybe start off with a short introduction of OneConnect, and then before we move to what has been new normal for us as a tech company, as a fintech company. So OneConnect is the fintech subsidiary of Ping An. And Ping An is both the largest insurance in China, as well as Ping An Bank, Ping An Investment. All in all, Ping An owns 28 subsidiaries in China that covers end-to-end financial institution requirements. And for OneConnect, we're 5-year-old as a company. Singapore takes care of Southeast Asia, which is businesses outside of China, and we are 2 years old currently. our solutions are all surrounding what a financial institution requires. So starting from a bank, and then slowly we're moving on to insurance companies on what they need. And of course, our most popular solutions are all surrounding what a digital bank needs, which nicely falls into something that we have always positioned as contactless to the customer. I mean, it's just coincidental that in COVID-19, you didn't want to have a lot of contacts. So all these contactless solutions became very popular. I mean, one of the most fundamental ones are the digital onboarding solutions, whereby you use facial recognition, voice print, OCR to read statements so that you don't have to go to a branch. So everything on digital onboarding and digital customer acquisition is a very relevant use case, both for COVID as well as for digital banks. And then the second part of it, of our solutions are all surrounding lending solutions, unsecured lending solutions. So Ping An is the largest unsecured lender in China. And for unsecured lending, it uses a lot of technologies to help you do your credit score using alternative data, etc., social media data. Then, of course, we have core banking solutions that helps to set up the entire new license. We have recently had our own license in Hong Kong. It's called Power Bank for Ping An One Connect Bank. So we call it Power Bank. And Power Bank is just recently gone live 2 or 3 days ago using our own technology stack. For One Connect, we have our values is that we have to try the solution first. So none of our solutions came from the lab to the customer. All our solutions came from deployments within the Ping An group, within our own virtual bank before it's deployed to customers. So what's the new normal for us? I think we've been very lucky in the technology space. We're less impacted compared to, say, hospitality and the rest of and retail, etc. So technology has been relatively less impacted. We're also very lucky that during in Q1, even though Q1 is a very slow Q1, considering Chinese New Year and China got locked down during Chinese New Year, our year-on-year growth is still 30%. Our shareholders view technology as doing well, even though COVID is going to move on to a bit of a recession. So you'll see that our share price actually doubled during this COVID period of time. So we're one of the luckier ones. We're very grateful for it, and we think that if we are agile enough to cater to what the customers require, because the banks have basically three actions, right? So you either don't do anything during the circuit breaker at all, you freeze, right? So you review your budget, you don't adopt technology, but we think that freeze is a short-term freeze, and then or you decide that you will go digital. So the fact that everybody's digital customers is double has really helped us. So I think I took maybe about, is it 10 minutes or so? I've got Horst here, then them, so that the rest can talk about their business as well.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps we can now move on to Xinwei.
Great, thanks Binru, thanks Manu. I actually prepared some slides, so I'm going to share my screen. But I promise I'll walk through them in a very concise way. So let me just do that right now. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Fantastic. So thanks again for having me. I'm very excited to be here, excited for the conversation that's upcoming. So, I thought I would just start by sharing, I guess, reflections from where I stand on what the new normal has meant for Grab, and see, how to draw some conclusions more broadly that apply to Singapore and our economy. So, I think the best way to characterize the new normal for us as a marketplace business is that it's really shifted the dynamics across all sides of the marketplace. As many of you are familiar, we are a two-sided marketplace in transport, a three-sided marketplace in food. And in many ways, our value comes from being able to find the right equilibrium between the demand and supply sides of this marketplace. And I think what we have seen with COVID, what COVID has done is it's really kind of catalyzed some fairly structural and fundamental shifts across all sides of this marketplace, but particularly, leading with consumer demand as consumers go online and sort of start to try a lot more categories online than they used to. That in turn triggers a change in merchants and their business models. And I think that adjustment has not always been the smoothest, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And you know, to continue to serve all that demand reliably and well, as a platform, we also need to think about sort of the supply side, which is the drivers and delivery partners. So let me just walk through this real quick. So I think the consumer story is fairly self-evident, which is that lots of people started going online to do things that they used to do offline. So just to share some sort of interesting tidbits from our business. We did see much higher volumes in March and April. People ordered a lot more, spent a lot more per order on our food delivery platform, GrabFood. You know, pre-existing trends were accentuated in some sense. I suppose it's difficult to unseat fried chicken, burgers, and bubble tea. So those continue to be people's favorite foods, probably, you know, to cope also with the being locked in and wanting comfort food. But we also saw a lot of new behaviors surface. So we started island-wide deliveries, which allowed people to try new restaurants. And that was sort of an experiment in saying like, hey, will people accept a much longer delivery time, or potentially, you know, a much slightly higher cost delivery, so that they can try some restaurant that's maybe higher end restaurants, something that they've never tried before? I think the answer there was yes. We also piloted a Michelin type category. We saw growth in categories like convenience, health and beauty, and our parcel delivery business sort of unexpectedly skyrocketed as people started to outsource errands. So I think what does this mean? For us, we do believe that this change is going to persist. We see different segments of users emerging. So I think in the past, people who use online platforms, especially online food delivery, tend to be more convenience seeking. I think increasingly we're going to see people look online to fulfill many different types of needs, not just convenience and speed. So people are going to look for variety. I think there's going to be people who are looking very much for sort of the high-end Michelin type experience, and restaurants are going to think about how to deliver that in a remote kind of setting, right? Like work from home, but maybe eat from home. But there's also going to be, I think, a polarization in a way. The economic impact of COVID, you know, it remains to be seen, but we do know that it's going to hit some sectors of our society fairly quickly and fairly substantially in a negative way. So I think the distinctions will sharpen as well, and what people are looking for from a platform like ours. So people are there's going to be people who are seeking very much sort of price-friendly or affordable options, as well as the very high end. And of course, growth in new categories will continue, especially categories that were previously not so penetrated. So I think for us here, the key challenge is really to make it accessible and seamless. You know, we talk a lot about sort of early adopters and so on, but now we have moved far beyond early adopters. So it's almost the opposite problem, which is how do I get my mom or my dad to successfully use the platform to order food for themselves. I think similarly, you know, there's a similar problem statement for consumer categories. So how do I get people comfortable with buying groceries or buying hair care products or personal care products on Grab than they might be with ordering a Grab car, you know, which is something that people are a lot more used to. So I think that's kind of how I would characterize a shift on the consumer side. I think in turn, that really is catalyzing a shift on the merchant side. And that's really where sort of the interesting and more complex trends are taking place. So for sure, there was a rush to get online. So we onboarded lots of merchants. I think what became very clear was that merchants were at very different levels of preparedness for this change. So some were really ready to go, but others were extremely, I would say, much less prepared for this change. And, you know, if I characterize the group that felt most pain from this change, it would be our MSMEs, the micro, small, medium enterprises, you know, our hawkers, coffee shops, small neighborhood stores. And, you know, for two main reasons. One is that they tend to be, and of course there are exceptions, they tend to be a bit less tech savvy. So any solution needs to be really simple. But the other reason is that their business is sort of fundamentally built on a brick and mortar model. So they tend to have sort of very high variable costs, high COGS, they have lower margins. So they generally just don't benefit as much from scale. So we have to find a way to serve them that fits into that cost structure and that's cheap for them. And don't forget, we still have to pay the guy who's delivering this thing. So there are many different sort of needs to balance on that platform. And I think something else that many of you will be familiar with and remember is that commissions became a point of friction. As dining activity disappeared, restaurants really started hurting because of that. And in many ways, we too, were trying to adapt to this new normal that, the industry was not really set up to be dependent on takeaway and delivery. So we were always sort of an extension of capacity, and suddenly this was kind of the be all and end all of the business. So there are sort of many adjustments going on. I would say the immediate term, what we tried to do was to focus on sustaining our partners, getting them through it. And I think there are a few kind of measures that we tried there. And we had lots of help as well from the Singapore government. So ESG helped to reduce commissions and so on. But I think there's going to be a longer term shift. And if what we believe is right about the consumer shift, then in the longer term, we need to find sustainable ways to get the MSMEs online, right? Because it's going to take time for their cost structures to shift. So we're going to have to try kind of new delivery concepts. How do we aggregate orders more? Can we move some of them to cloud kitchens? How do we really get them online and help them optimize their online presence? So that's something that many, I would say, brick and mortar businesses have a lot less experience with. Can they start using ads? Can they start using different tools to boost their visibility? I think that's sort of a new sort of segment of services that we're going to have to start offering to our restaurants and our merchants on the platform, not just F&B, but all merchants on our platform. And at the same time, food deliveries in a, I would say, fairly early stage in Singapore and in Southeast Asia. I think there's still lots of room to optimize. We can drive costs down a lot more through batching, aggregating orders. I think all of these things need to come together to sort of form this sort of new, maybe a new concept or a new equilibrium for merchants who are trying to digitalize and make it sustainable sort of across all sides of the platform and including for the platform itself. So I'll end off by talking really quick about the gig economy. I think for us on the supply side, it became clear that the gig economy is here to stay. Many gig jobs became termed as essential services. And I think going forward, gig work can be an important source of income for people who lose their jobs through this crisis and so on. I think what we kind of learn and on reflection realize is that we have a very significant and deep role to play in providing stability. So the job itself may be transitional for a lot of people, but the platform can provide sort of a layer of stability. So something that we were able to do was that we moved across the region over 100,000 drivers whose transport livelihood diminished drastically upon all the lockdowns and so on. We moved them to do deliveries. We were able to onboard a lot more delivery partners. We were able to sort of leverage our scale to offer and existing relationships with insurers to offer them insurance. So if anyone got sick or got quarantined, they got insurance. And I think longer term, we're thinking sort of upskilling, place and train. So we see our role as not just being a platform for people to participate in gig work today, but also to help them transition out of that, to what's their next gig. And I think in many ways, the crisis underscored our commitment to this and also highlighted to us, that we can't do this alone. I think in Singapore, we had a lot of government support and we also collaborated very closely with the unions. And I think that there's an arrangement that we believe has some longevity for us as we go into the new normal, that we want to continue to deepen that connection. So I'll end off here. I think I've taken a bit of time, but glad to discuss any of this in more detail as we go along. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Shinwei. I think you've really helped us understand quite a bit. So we've had two industry practitioners, Binru and Shinwei, introduce some ideas about how businesses have responded, and I'm sure there must be some questions. So please prepare some questions or comments so that we can have a nice, lively discussion after the presentations. Let me now call on Yinglan, who's been an observer of all these trends for many, many years, to give his views. Please, Yinglan.
Hi, I'm Yinglan. Just a quick intro of myself. I run Insignia Ventures Partners, which is an early stage Southeast Asia focused technology venture fund. We manage roughly approximately $500 million Sing dollars, and we've been investing actively in the region, primarily Indonesia, Vietnam, Singapore, across various technology sectors, fintech. I think my first point is that I think this crisis, we always say that the crisis has familiar shapes. It gets very bad, then it improves, and it does not repeat, but it rhymes. So we see some semblance of what is happening now between what is happening in 2008. There are some similarities, of course, some jarring differences. And we serve on the boards of many technology companies. And I think it's in these times of crisis that we see, it's a time for leadership. We see leaders emerge, we see leaders disappear. There's no fixed playbook for our portfolio CEOs. But we always advise them that, hey, you should keep a microscope on one eye and a telescope in the other, and try not to get a headache, because you have to be focused both on the short term and also long term, right? So, and I think one of the things we've been telling them is, hey, not only is net revenue and profit, which I'm sure Singwei is very familiar with. She does the real job. We just theorize and advise. It's not only about profit, net revenue, but it's also about cash flow, and that's really the lifeblood of some of these companies that we're serving on the board of. And I think there are some interesting trends that we see as we observe the trend. I think one is that the spending on entertainment has skyrocketed, right? So Netflix, for example, they gained 2.3 million of subscribers in Q1 alone. People are consuming more content. There's more spending on entertainment online. Surprisingly, there's also spending a lot of spending on home improvement and home electronics as people are staying at home. So we actually, these trends may have a sandbox effect where it's tracked at a new high post people going back to work. As I'm sure we are doing meetings over Zoom. Sometimes I wonder, hey, whether we will drastically change the way of doing business. Instead of flying to Indonesia for a work trip, maybe we can do this over Zoom in the future. So as we place a lot of trips that we think how we're going to do our business in the future. Online education is a big bright spot. Some of our portfolio companies are growing like 13 times in the past 3-4 months in the online education space. I have 3 kids, right? 2 of them, in the past few months have just been walking from their bedroom to the study room and taking classes. One of them took an exam recently with a tripod behind them, to make sure they are not cheating. It has always been sort of in measures like this in place, but I think this has really accelerated the pace at which this has been education has been, or learning has been conducted. I think the virus is a great equalizer, right? I think dense cities like Singapore, tend to feel this as bad as places like Africa, for example, where it is spread out, but I think you also have dense apartments. And I think on certain sectors that we are focusing on, I think, for example, fintech, right? I think lending will have to be based on the new risk curve in the new normal, right? I think gone are the days where you sort of have a fixed algorithm to lend. I think, in some of the developing markets, we've seen, sort of the risk curves are thrown out of the window. Anti-fraud will be of increased importance. Enterprise sales cycle will be getting longer and longer. I think that there will be shrinkage of liquidity. I think we'll see new models of credit and credit scoring. And I think it's the funny thing we're seeing, some of our stock brokerage companies in Indonesia, they're seeing a lot of trading, because I presume people have nothing to do, just they stay at home and trade stocks, and do wealth management. And we find that there's some surprising trends which we did not expect. So, for example, one of our companies, Igloo Home, right? They sell smart locks. So we see that a lot of hotels and property owners are buying smart locks for contactless access, which we did not expect. There's some sort of black swan impact that is positively affecting these companies. We have a company called Easy, which is a B2B marketplace. Their business soared, tripled, the past 3 months, because people are, buying more hand sanitizer and masks and gloves and all that. We see our companies like Caro, which is a used car marketplace business, thriving as well, because hey, now no one to buy a new car. They want to save money, right? But they want to take Grab. Sometimes, maybe maybe seeing different data. But people want to buy used car, and they spend more on repairing their cars instead of buying new cars. So we see a which actually are second, third order ramification of COVID. that we are starting to see. Yeah, but I think end of the day, I think this could be an interesting opportunity for us, because when you look at companies like Zoom, right? They're offering free video for primary school. You know, Amazon is offering free books. You know, I think a lot of the forward-looking companies, like this, like for example, actually Grab as well. I think they launched a nationwide delivery of this gourmet, you know, Michelin gourmet dishes, which is, I think, for innovative companies that are sort of able to rethink new business models in the new normal. I think this could be a great opportunity to capture market share. But I'll stop at that, and then you know, we can chat more later about new trends.
Thank you, Yinglan, for that overview of so many different and very interesting trends. Can we now go on to Jonathan to give us the behavioral economics perspective? Thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. And thanks also to our fellow panelists for sharing all these insights and corporate experiences. I must say, I mean, it's not been an easy ride here in academia either. So I'll start off by sharing some experiences from the education sector, and this will kind of set the stage for me to discuss the role of, you know, it's like education and shaping the new normal later on, okay? So when COVID-19 first landed on our sunny shores of Singapore early on this year, then, you know, our infection rates were at time pretty subdued, and there was no widespread sense of fear, but one could sense like there was this rising concern, right? As the global situation escalated from day to day to the point of being classified as a global pandemic by WHO. Like many other countries, Singapore went into circuit breaker mode, and the economy as we knew it, you know, abruptly steeped into this hibernation mode. So amidst the volatile and ever-changing circumstances, I mean, one thing is our universities never ever stopped working to give the students the best experience. So all around me, I could witness my colleagues, you know, innovating and teaching and research and going beyond just porting content and classes online. So actually going one step further and progressively developing new methods in digital learning. So examples include, you know, complementing online tests of more traditional formats with these team digital posters and YouTube-style presentations to harness the online collaborative skills of our undergraduates in processing, generating, transferring economic knowledge, as well as building virtual labs to actually collect behavioral data remotely yet rigorously and safely, of course. So people are like water, you know, you try to block it and we'll find another way. Yeah, tourism, dining out, sports, school, religious gatherings, you know, the circuit breaker can bring all these things to a complete halt. But that's not stopped us from seeing the world through, say, TikTok or YouTube, you know, enjoying Michelin star food delivered by Grab, or working, worshipping, making music together online through Zoom. And these digital platforms, they actually preserve the links, the links, the connections between demand and supply nodes on these networks. And in turn, you know, it allows us to continue very important activities. So on the other hand, it's actually our preparedness, how prepared we are, that allows us to not just survive, but thrive in the new normal. Okay? So for this, we have to embrace change at various levels of decision making. And the main problem here is that when we talk about a new normal, it's like, we're not just talking about COVID and what COVID has made us do and what it will keep us doing, but also how COVID has hit us at a very bad time, a time when global recession has been looming at our doorstep. So since 2018-19, you know, economists have been worried about a global recession in 2020 or so, arising from many things: aggregate demand slumps all over the world, low productive investment, market volatility, protectionist uncertainties, weak responses to monetary policy stimulation, low growth, high debt. So to visualize this problem of what we might be facing in the new normal, you know, think of an already ill economy being struck suddenly by a crippling external shock, and the external shock here is COVID, right? It's terrifying, okay? So, I mean, the thing is, Singapore is in a comparably competitive position in that, you know, it's like we've got a pretty motivated, educated, skilled workforce, and this is coupled by a very stable and supportive government. So with a mindset that's willing to embrace change, I think we can actually pivot our capabilities, learn new skills, contemplate new ways to take advantage of new opportunities. And so, you know, it's like what I want to do here is to better understand, you know, it's like think about how this preparedness can actually elevate us into a higher new normal than before. And actually allow us to think hard about how we can better, you know, it's like our economy, At a time when, it's like positions are just shifting, it's like some might leapfrog to the front, some might fall and lag behind. So there are three key issues I wanted to talk about, and that's related to recessions rather than, it's like just the COVID. And of course, I'll talk about it in relation to COVID as well, that would challenge us as we make this climb to a new normal. And the 3 points are 1, efficiency, 2, inclusivity, and 3, social capital. Yeah. So in terms of efficiency, is like one of the greatest threats of recessions is that of job loss. We're all worried about job losses. Yeah. And that can be the start of a downward spiral if left unchecked. So the immediate reason is that job losses translate to the loss of purchasing power, and then in turn, it worsens the demand slump. As an open economy, Singapore is very vulnerable to not just local but global unemployment. So that's a serious problem. And not only is unemployment financially costly to the macroeconomy, it dampens investments through the reduction of returns to investment and in turn future income. So it's a very socially costly effect at the micro level, such as through the impediment of cognitive processes to make good household choices in aspects such as finance, nutrition, education. And studies also show how bouts of unemployment actually decrease long-run earnings. So that, it's like there's a real priority of getting people back into the jobs as fast as we can, okay, value-added jobs. So economists have therefore proposed this cure for recession. It's a cocktail of, it's like job creation and productive investment. So self-employment, that's one, and entrepreneurship, that's one way we can, like head towards greener pastures after leaving employment. But then the thing is, the risk is high. The number of startups that succeed are very much in the minority. And furthermore, it's like business ideas, capital, business acumen, these are not things that are readily available to individuals. So basically, some people tend to, prefer to actually stake out for the next available job, to wait it out, and that actually, unfortunately brings us back to square one. So drawing on our regional connectivity and experience, my first question is, how can we consolidate and mobilize Singapore's comparative advantage in human resources to convert business ideas into successful ventures? This is my first question. Yeah. So I'm not here to provide solutions, I'm here to ask questions. Right. So the next point is inclusivity. Right. So the disruption of educational opportunities is another way by which these recessions can actually leave a permanent scar on the economy. And this effect, unfortunately, tends to transmit through lower income households because maybe sometimes they delay their studies because of shortage of funds due to a parent's unemployment, or maybe they try to supplement the family income by working part-time at least instead. So this actually also stuns social mobility and economic growth. And it comes back to you, it's like a country could lose its competitive edge on the global arena. So, I mean, in this case, public investment in socially inclusive educational system has these, it's like economy lifting ROI effects, and it's crucial. But we should, I think, also scrutinize and preemptively mitigate any non-fee, as in, it's like school fee, tuition fee related effects that recessions have on discouraging education at bad times, because people might have the mindset that it's bad times, why do I want to study so much, so I'll just go back to work. So related to my first point on job creation and ability matching, what we teach them at school also matters in terms of their propensity towards, collaborative employment or collaborative work. It's actually quite very reassuring that the local university in Singapore, we have been increasing the offering of interdisciplinary courses, and there's been a recent movement towards integrating training in, say, for example, computer science, and complement that with not just applied and medical sciences, but things like arts and social sciences. And these things will undoubtedly shape our strategic position in the new normal. So the next question number 2 is, how should we actually advise students to convert these learning opportunities, or actually be there for them to support them to convert these learning opportunities to career skills and success? Okay, so the last point I want to touch on, and I think it's very important, especially from the perspective of a behavior economist, is that of social capital, and how social capital plays a role in contributing to economic success in the new normal. So there's a potential danger of actually increased reliance on online human interaction, which is great. I mean, in terms like circuit breaker and all that. And, it's like, I'm hoping to see a lot more of this kind of online human interaction. But I think that it cannot completely substitute for physical face-to-face activities. Because I mean, like a wealth of studies in, like behavioral science have shown that, it's like, this reduced group involvement actually decreases things like the quality of democracy, education, health, life in general. So in comparison to traditional physical meetup, in say clubs, associations, the cost of joining and participation in online groups is actually quite low, you see. So basically what happens is that the signal of commitment to the group is low, and in turn, it's like it might be less effective in accumulating this thing called social capital for society. That's what we need to actually promote things like trust in business relationships or social economic interactions. Yeah, so I think that is a deeper issue that we should be attentive to. And a similar argument extends to distance learning. So I'm going to bring it one full circle and come back to learning. And distance collaboration via work from home arrangements. We need to complement these technological means of working with human touch, with the human touch, working with the human touch, rather than to replace our community with trustless, faceless, heartless institutions that are driven purely by financial incentive mechanisms. And by this, I don't mean a company per se, but I mean like how you actually incentivize people, how you pay people, how you get them to communicate, collaborate. These are the institutions I'm talking about. It's like abstract institutions, not necessarily companies or organizations. So, I mean, well, I pray that there's no second wave of COVID-19 infections. I would similarly caution against a new normal where reduced peer group interaction today actually spills over to reduced social skills and community spirit tomorrow. Because these bear serious implications on the future of social cohesion and in turn economic growth. So my third and final question for today would be, given the public health threats from COVID-19, what are ways by which we can build social capital through feasible forms of interaction in the new normal? So with that, thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think you've raised a lot of very deep questions that we need to address. And I think overall, first of all, I must thank the panelists for sticking to the time so well. We now have actually a lot of time for discussion, which is fantastic. And we've already got quite a number of questions. So I'm going to pick a couple. Some are specific to speakers. So let me go through that very quickly. There's some interest in Ping An. The question is, will lending, I guess it means unsecured lending, lead to a problem of repayment, particularly given that the COVID crisis has hurt incomes? Do you want to give a quick answer to that?
Definitely.
Thanks.
Yeah. So immediately when we entered into the crisis, for sure, especially in countries whereby the government has indicated that maybe the SMEs not pay back, like for example in Indonesia. So in the month of April, when the Indonesian government made the announcement, indeed you see that lending totally stopped, right? And companies that were previously intending to do more unsecured lending definitely have second thoughts, given that we're entering into recession. Quite a number of the micro SMEs may not make it. So it's important to address the concerns. I mean, for us, for One Connect, we service the bank, so we're constantly trying to address the bank's concerns. And in shortly a month, you will know that it is not sustainable to stop all your loans altogether. So you must find a way to come back to it. So what we have implemented is that we have implemented a COVID filter that allows the banks to better score. So initially there is a bit of a dip, definitely even in China, in terms of loan volume. And slowly is coming back. We've introduced a COVID filter that allows them to better rate with alternative data. We've taken the China learnings in terms of which, so there isn't a lot of data on COVID currently, but based on China's learnings, we know what sector is recovering first, what sector is not recovering, and how long they're taking to recover. So we've added a very simple filter that allows the banks to be able to score it differently. The other thing that we have done is the fact that a lot of central banks require the NPL be calculated differently with COVID. So if you have a default for a loan for a certain sector that's taken due to COVID situation, you might want to calculate the NPL differently, give it a flag or a longer repayment term, and that's a simple ask, but to many banks it's very difficult to adjust your loan origination system to do that. So that's the other thing that we did to overcome this by introducing simple plug-ons, so that the bank's current loan origination system can pick up these filters and calculate the NPL differently. So as a tech company, I would think short-term dips and concerns is there, but as long as your R&D and your product features is agile enough to cater to the needs, it will overcome the problem. We do see that in the longer run, that loan volume will continue to go up because instead of down, right? The risks will high chance be different. The scoring mechanism will high chance be different. Different sectors might grow differently, but overall loan volume will go up with even if the recession sinks in. Yeah.
Right. It's interesting. So your technology was able to adjust very quickly to a new situation, so that the credit scoring based on previous trends could be adapted and adjusted to take into account the new risks that emerged with COVID-19. But that's very fast, huh?
Yes, and I shared this previously. I think the fintechs are also, not all fintechs is going to do well with the recession. There's going to high chance be a consolidation of fintechs as well. The ones that have a problem are the single solution fintechs. One Connect is very fortunate because we have Ping An solutions that's pretty wide in range and services. And plus, Ping An puts in $1.5 billion worth of R&D every year. So we do have good support from China to be able to quickly take customers' requirements into consideration and rejig some of our products.
Thank you. Do any of the other panelists want to chip in here on this issue of fintech adaptation and consolidation and so on?
Yeah, I can chip in a bit. I think I mentioned earlier, I think fraud is going to be an interesting area to we notice a lot of fraud, especially in the first waves of COVID. So that's one trend that I think we'll see. I think as Binru mentioned, the risk curves have to be reassessed quite rapidly. I think those that reacted fastest to sort of clamp down loans and readjust their lending parameters did the best in terms of NPL. Whereas those who dragged their feet, I think, suffered. I think the third trend that we're starting to see is, the rise of the digital banks. And just for full disclosure, we actually partnered with we invested in one digital bank called Tonic in the Philippines. We are in a bid together with Razer for a Singapore one. Of course, I'm sure Xinwei knows more details about that with another bid going on. But I think this is, globally, I think we're going to see a rise of this because millennials in general are going to sort of avoid, they generally already avoid going to bank branches if they can. I think the COVID situation definitely helps. If I can avoid getting all my bank, procedures done on the app, I think that's going to, make life even easier and I think accelerate the adoption much faster.
Interesting. Anyone else have any other comments to say? Go ahead. Well, we're getting a lot of questions in, so maybe let me consolidate some. There's some interest in the impact of all this COVID and so on small, medium-sized enterprises. One question is about how COVID and the protectionism that seems to be accompanying this current period, how will they affect SMEs going forward? Another question was on, again, for micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, they face a real challenge in trying to digitize and go online. So, this is actually directed to Xinwei. The question is whether consumers were really accepting of these new value propositions like island-wide delivery and Michelin experience. The impression they got from your opening is that consumers were much more prepared and better ready for this engagement, but the MSMEs are the bottleneck. Is that really what you were trying to say? And could you elaborate on those points? So a lot of interest in SMEs. Maybe Xinwei can go first and the others could.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Please.
So yeah, I think there are a few questions here around the same theme of MSMEs. So I think first on the question of were MSMEs the so-called bottleneck or was it more consumers? I suppose I would see it this way. So in both the consumer and the merchant segments, there are clearly groups that are very sort of digitally savvy, and then there are groups that are very much the opposite. I would say that the reason why the consumer shift was a little bit more seamless was that there are first, smartphone penetration is very, very high in Singapore. Most people know how to sort of use basic smartphone functions. So for instance, many people know how to use WhatsApp, even though they may not know how to make an order on GrabFood. And if you look at the penetration of different segments or categories, you see that, so even for Grab, transport penetration is higher, online sort of ordering cars online has a higher penetration than ordering food online, which has a higher penetration than ordering groceries and so on. And maybe COVID has shifted some, obviously COVID has shifted many of those things. But I think what this means is that there was a more gentle flight path coming in for consumers who may have already been online doing a certain activities to sort of move more of the activities online. Whereas for MSMEs and many merchants, that shift was quite, I would say it was from 0 to 1. And that's, I think, where the pain happens. And, so I'm not sure if I would characterize it as MSMEs were a bottleneck to digitalization per se, but they definitely struggled because they didn't have sort of that, there wasn't a sort of foundational digital capability there. Unlike for consumers, many of them already had sort of some feel of how to use online services. So yeah, I mean, there are consumer groups definitely that need lots of help. So the elderly is one very clear focus area. IMDA is doing a lot here. We also help, work with IMDA to run digital clinics. But I would say that the groups that need help on the consumer side are sort of a lot more, they're sort of more obvious and they're sort of easy to characterize, whereas across the merchant segments, there are sort of big pockets of merchants that are just not as digitally savvy. Yeah.
Anyone else wants to come in on those questions?
Maybe I will just add that from a technology standpoint, it is the same that micro SMEs faces more challenge. A good example would be like KYC. So KYC for retail or individuals are pretty well established. KYCs for corporates actually can relatively be also fully digital, given that there's a lot of database and infrastructure, but KYCs for micro SMEs can be challenging. Not so much the audience may be different because they are older and less digital savvy. Usually the taukees are perhaps have someone doing for them. But also the infrastructure is not there. I think the infrastructure not there, the data is not consolidated, not there, I think is one key area. So micro SMEs from a digital adoption perspective from where I came from is similar trends as what Xingwei is saying. Yeah.
Interesting. There are no comments on this. Let's move on to another set of questions. There's some questions on particular industries, so I'll lump it together. One is the impact of all this on e-learning. Will overseas graduate, postgraduate programs become obsolete as a result? Maybe Jonathan can address that. And then there's also the thing that has been raised in many forums as actually, what is the impact of all this on current and future office space demand? If there's going to be a lot more work from home, will even the layout and design of offices shift away from open space and office plan back towards cubicles again, for instance? So what are the changes in this area? If one of you could also comment. Maybe I'll start with Jonathan and the impact on postgraduate programs and so on.
Okay, so why do you come to a lecture? Why do you not stay at home and just watch the video? There's a very big difference. The difference is like, let me come up and use an analogy. It's like, why do we go to watch a Shakespeare play at the Barbican live? Why do we sit there and listen to the orchestra play? Because the experience is completely different. Also for the performer, also for the lecturer, the professor. It's like when I have eye contact with you, I can become more sensitive to your needs. And funny enough, as professors, it's like we've picked up that skill along the way, somewhere along the way. We've got the extra sensory perception to know what you're going to ask and to answer that question, sometimes even before you ask it, by teaching it in a different way. So lectures are very dynamic, okay? Getting out of the lecture theater, think about it. What does the Sistine Chapel smell like? What is it like to stand there and stare up into the ceiling? It is very different than looking at it on a YouTube video or a Google image. So the experience is completely different. So overseas postgraduate experiences do not just give you the joy of learning in a different country. It lets you live in a different country, to immerse yourself in the cultures of others, and to actually be exposed to that educational package as a whole. So, you know, it's like, and that doesn't differ from going to NTU, NUS, SMU, you know, it's like for a solid education. I think the other thing from the perspective of an educator is that, you know, so what, or even employers, is what is the cost that you as an individual are willing to bear to go somewhere to study? That shows your commitment and your belief in your self-capabilities, your abilities, and your competitiveness in the market. If you can actually hack a good, tough course at Harvard, for example, or NUS, NTU, yeah, that sends a very strong signal, and it's going to be very different from just, you know, taking an edX course and scoring 100% after your third try or something like that. Yeah, I mean, of course, there's a role. I mean, that notwithstanding, there's a very strong role for e-education. I think e-education is great. I mean, I myself have benefited a lot from e-education because it brings the lecture to your doorstep. And I think e-education has advanced so much that the quality that you get online, it actually gives lecturers, you know, it's like in brick and mortar institutions, a run for the money. Yeah. So for me, it's like before I give a lecture, I look at how they teach in MIT. I look at how they teach Khan Academy, you know, and I think, how am I going to explain stuff better using online facilities, complemented with, you know, it's like my face-to-face interactions to improve the experience for the students. So I think that there still is a role for, you know, it's like physical education. I mean, not physical. I mean, like face-to-face brick and mortar institutions.
So is what you're saying that all this e-learning and all that has been adopted a lot more would be more complementary rather than replacing the conventional modes of education?
Yes, yes. I think that, you know, it's I mean, it's the entire package that you go for when you know, it's like you take a course. I mean, you take a degree, say overseas. You know, it's like the joy of being in Oxford, the joy of being, you know, it's like wherever it is. I mean, that kind of feel, the Oxford experience cannot be replicated online.
That's true. Anyone else wants to pick up on those things, particularly the question on office space? Maybe Yinglan, you could address that. Do you see a reduced demand for office and retail space as a result of all this, you know, online stuff?
We are sort of rethinking, you know, what is the future of you know, living and working and shopping post COVID. I mean, it'll probably take a long time for you know, so the new normal to go back to the old normal. It may not happen at all. And we are seeing the new models of, you know, co-living blend with co-working, blend with even co-retail, where, hey, instead of you know, taking a car to go to the city to do some shopping, eating at a nice restaurant downtown, or, you know, going to work in the office in CBD, hey, actually, people can work remotely, and they want a building where they co-live with other people. At the basement of the building, there's some meeting space for the occasional board meeting you need to hold, and then there's retail space at the bottom of the building as well. So it's a new age escort model, right, where you manage property for real estate owners, but you partition the type of utilization for different purposes, which minimize travel, especially in places like Jakarta, where traffic is very bad, right? You can you know, shop, live, and work at the same place. I think that's sort of what some of the new models we've seen. And I think the other models that we've seen is actually also quite interesting, which blends collaboration and sort of video meetings with Zoom. So we're seeing, you know, sort of interesting software application that ties in with sort of building infrastructure as well. So that's some of the trends we are seeing.
Some people are talking about de-densification, that you know, you get a much more spread out pattern of urban living and working. Do you buy into that, or is that premature to comment on?
Yeah, I think we are starting to see some early data of that, where, hey, at least in China, where there's some recovery taking place, you know, people are going out into the suburbs more and more. There's no long distance international trips, but a lot more sort of trips into the suburbs of, let's say, Beijing or Shanghai, instead of away from, you know, long trips, you know, but shorter trips, shorter holidays, local travel. and away from the CBD, but into remote location where they can conduct their work remotely. So that's some of the early trends I say, but data is still too early to say. I think China is only one data point. I think let it play out a bit more before we can have a conclusion.
Interesting, thank you. Anyone else want to say anything before we move on to the next set of questions? Okay, there's another sort of set of questions that's really, I guess, around Singapore's economic model. One question in this line is that should we focus moving our economy towards a less manufacturing and less labor intensive, but more technology and service intensive? Another question similar is with less international travel and so on, should Singapore be looking more inward, being more independent? I guess they mean less dependent on external demand. Is this even possible? What do you all want? Maybe Jonathan, you're the economist here, so maybe you can help us.
Okay, I'll try to look at the macro world from a micro behavioral economist perspective. So pardon me for my ignorance. So first thing, I think there are two questions here. I mean, somewhat related. So the first one, the economic model that Singapore is using, less manufacturing to tech intensive. I think the big money is in innovation. It's in complexity. It's in productivity. It's like you can spend the whole month making 1 million boxes of cigarettes. You're not gonna make as much money as it's like sending a shipload of BMWs or Mercedes-Benz. Yeah. So I mean, it's like a Rolex watch. Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe. What is it that we're paying for? It's the complexity, the craftsmanship. I like using examples, and I think those are examples that would tell us why we should not completely discard manufacturing, but think of what manufacturing. I think we're on a pretty good track because it's like pharmaceuticals. It's a great place to be. There's a lot of complexity there. It's like high tech, silicon chips, so on and so forth. I think we've got pretty good ground there. So in terms of changing economic model, it's like I think what we should do is to it's like harness and ride the wind, and to identify it's like preemptively, it's like new areas where we can actually forge forward. And then on the second point on it's like less international travel. Well, I might be biased, but travel is great. Be out there, go out there. And the thing is, it's like I also believe in internationalization, globalization, regionalization. Singapore is in a very strategic position. Why throw that away by not traveling? It's like we are close to all the ASEAN countries where growth is huge. If you look on the IMF roadmap and you see all those little colors, it's like you see that the red areas are where you've got recessions, and where are those? The Western world. Okay, but if you look around us, ASEAN, India, China, that's where it's green pastures. It's growing, and we've got a pretty good it's like position as well, strategically, geographically. It's like we've traded with them. It's like we're quite familiar with the ways, we've got experience. It's like we've got to solidify the network. I mean, even in this panel itself, it's like we've got people from it's like different parts of these green areas, so to speak. I mean, it's like operating in these green areas. So I think that's where the money is. Singapore is really too small. I mean, it's really too small to be like relying on its own it's like demand and supply. I mean, like so we need to make the world our oyster. If you allow me to say that, yeah.
Excellent. Anyone else want to chip in here?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Jonathan. I mean, this thing about being localized, really not diversifying or having your local production, not less reliant on others and all that really doesn't apply to Singapore. Singapore's market is at least the ASEAN market, and that continues. I'm seeing actually more and more traction towards cross or international platforms. We recently started with IMDA to build ASEAN, Singapore, China platform. So the first connection is just Singapore SMEs and China SMEs. And we're seeing a lot of interest in that, especially now people cannot travel. They can't go there and build relationships, but they understand that Singapore's market needs to be a regional market. And therefore, leveraging on technology will maybe help you kickstart some opportunities, collaboration, etc. It may not do everything without traveling. Ultimately, you still need to travel to get some things done, but lesser dependent on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, that brings us to another question that was asked, and this is about regionalization. we've been trying to get our SMEs and even our graduates to explore the region, right? I guess that means the ASEAN region. So the question is, how is the pandemic, the current crisis, helping to reshape this? Are we seeing more business opportunities, more opportunities to push this kind of regionalization? Any of you want to take that question? It's quite interesting.
So the Singapore government has always pushed for regionalization. Yeah, so this is even before COVID, nothing to do with COVID. But the regional, even the digital banks of Singapore requires all digital banks applicants requires to submit an ASEAN strategy instead of just a Singapore strategy, right? So I think that continues for Singapore. We recognize that we need that. So I don't see that as a shift due to COVID. Yeah. So I guess for smaller markets and developed markets, we belong to the highest impact of COVID, actually. So if you look at COVID, the GDP is supposed to come down by 5.5%. The recession 10 years ago, financial recession, the GDP went down by 1.6%. So 5.5% is ridiculously high, right? And out of, if you look segmented, the smaller developed countries gets hit the hardest, which is Singapore.
Yeah.
Some others. So I think we need to push harder. The direction that we've been pushing for regionalization needs to continue, if not more, yeah, going forward. Yeah.
Okay. I'm conscious of the time, so let's try and get as many questions as possible. I apologize if we can't cover all the questions, but here's another one. It goes like, as we see that bigger companies and conglomerates have better resources to adapt to the difficulties in the current situation, would there be an unhealthy shift towards more concentration in markets, less competition? It's a big question, actually. And already, I think there's been already some pushback against big tech, right? In Facebook has come under pressure for a variety of reasons, but there is certainly a growing concern about dominance in some industries. How do you see this playing out? Any of you want to take that question?
I can take that, if you like. I think we are seeing a strain on especially the SMEs, and usually by the fact that you're SME, you don't have many months of cash flow in your bank account, right? So we are seeing some of the SMEs with limited cash flow. I think there will be significant level of bankruptcy, despite, I mean, in the case of Singapore government's best efforts to sort of provide subsidy packages, right, with 4 budgets. Because I think the truth is that really this has developed from a health crisis to an economic crisis to actually a more profound, sometimes people say a political crisis, right? And as you think about the second and third bounce of the ball, it's not like the 08 crisis where it's a banking crisis, right? But here I think it's a crisis on Main Street. And I see we have sort of manifestation of SMEs that didn't take adequate measures very quickly early on. They are now facing the music. I mean, those that reacted quickly to cut burn, to slash headcount, to take pay cuts, to put off unnecessary expenses, collect accounts receivable much earlier. They are actually much better placed. And I think there's no right playbook, but I think it's about the character, the resilience, the right judgment calls by some of these SME owners. And I think if you go look back, I mean, hopefully we are in a better state of the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu actually had 3 waves, and there were many people died in Spanish flu than World War I. So I hate to be a pessimist here, but I don't think we are near the end of this. And I think the staying power of some of these SMEs may be in question. So I think it is up to some of these SME owners to course correct quickly, and the faster they do, the better they react. I just want to actually also comment on some of the SMEs in the region, right? I mean, if we look at some of Vietnam portfolio, they've done very well and very resilient, right? I think in SARS, Vietnam had no deaths. I think currently in COVID, Vietnam has 0 deaths again. I think that their reaction to this situation is quite laudable. And some of our portfolio companies in Vietnam actually has thrived, despite the difficult situation globally. So I think that is one bright spot. I think the other interesting bright spot that we've seen is actually we did a correlation among our portfolio CEOs, which is that we have seen sort of the women leaders stand out, and actually in sort of the political arena, we see some of the states run by women actually tended to react better to the crisis as well. And I see Sin Wei, juggling her job very well, and Bin Ru as well. So that's actually one interesting anecdote that we sort of observe casually among our portfolio CEOs, that the women founders tend to take swifter measures and tend to be more reactive to the situation than others.
Sin Wei, I think Grab has come under some criticism. This whole notion related to this idea of the big companies sort of bullying the small companies. So you had to deal with that. And so could you maybe elaborate on the challenge that Grab faced, how it responded to it?
Yeah, I think this is a very complex and nuanced topic. I think, at the big picture, we will definitely see like some consolidation taking place in various sectors. I think that's unavoidable. So the question is whether this consolidation is good or bad for the players involved. And I think, if it comes down to saying there are going to be consolidations in places or industries where it seems very concerning. So, when you talk about Facebook coming under fire, I think it's because they have, I suppose, the tools in hand to influence opinions and beliefs of large parts of the population, right? So that sort of invites governments, regulators, and civil societies to sort of come together and say like, hey, like, what's the impact of this kind of consolidation? That may not always be the case. And I think something that we have tried to do is to work closely with governments and unions, and to try and say that, despite the fact that we serve different parts of the marketplace, there are always going to be ways that we could do better. But let's try and get the sort of best situation that we can out of the cards that we have been dealt. And I think in a lot of ways, I think the criticisms that we have come under are kind of a symptom of everyone having to make a painful shift at the same time. And a painful shift happening across many different dimensions simultaneously. So that our business has also suffered, like the transport business obviously was very heavily impacted. MSMEs have suffered. And together we have to kind of try to find this new equilibrium. So I would say that, there's going to be painful adjustments for everyone involved. I think the important part is to sort of have a very clear-minded view of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve in terms of creating kind of good outcomes for everyone in the marketplace. And to work towards that and to sort of be very collaborative with governments and unions, and to use the power of platforms for the greater good. I think, every government is going to have to make certain judgments about where or how they want to apply, more oversight or less oversight, or more pressure or less pressure on different parts. And I think that's a conversation that we've sort of been very open and wanting to have with governments across the region that we work with, to see like where we can help, where they feel that we should do better, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be an adjustment. I think it's not a straightforward question as to whether concentration is good or bad and so on.
Okay, thank you. I know we are running out of time, but the organizer has graciously consented to let us drag on for a few minutes more. And I want to take this question that just came in from Professor Danny Kwa. If I can find it. Oops. Sorry, it seems to have disappeared. It was about de-densification. I think Professor Kwa was asking whether we could have more comment on the question I raised about de-densification. His argument is that the COVID crisis makes people more concerned about working in densely, and would that not result in some behavioral changes that would then change the way, I guess, our urban setting is designed? and how should Singapore respond to that? I think somehow the question seems to have disappeared from the box, but if I recall correctly, that is what the question is about. Yeah, it's come back now. Yeah.
I will just send it to the chat. The question, I've sent it to the chat to you.
Yeah, I've got it again. Who wants to take that? Any comments? Maybe Yinglan, do you want to elaborate on what you said earlier? So the idea is de-densification, not so much people making local travel and all that, but actual fundamental change in the way urban centers are designed. So you get less concentration in urban centers and more spread out business activities. You know?
Yeah, I think we are starting to see the early signs of that. And I think we see sort of the urban and infrastructure development actually starting to change as new property owners, developers that we are having conversations with are starting to take that into take their design considerations. I think we look at dense cities like Tokyo, Singapore. I think it's in times of crisis like this, it's much harder to contain that. And I think the different work and living and recreational configurations that we're seeing are quite creative. I think the other interesting point is how people are devoting to sort of this concept of work-life balance, right? I think now it's increasingly more murky, right? I mean, I can be in a Zoom meeting in one room, and then my daughter comes in and listening on the meeting, and then at the next door she's having a class, and I go in and check in on her, and then while I'm tending to my business. I think that concept has blurred, maybe for better or for worse, but I think that has to be considered as we are redesigning buildings and even cities.
Thank you. There are a lot of other questions, but I think, Dan, we are probably running out of time. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't give a last opportunity to the panelists. If there's any burning question or comment they want to conclude with, please, this is your chance now. Anybody of you? Bindru, anything?
No, I think we spoke a lot. I'm really happy that there's so many participants and a lot of questions. So if we fail to take these questions online, we're more happy to have our emails provided so that we can address them offline.
Oh, thank you. We'll follow up on that. Xinwei, anything to add?
No, echo Binru's comments. Thank you all very much for this discussion.
Thank you. Yinglan, anything?
Oh, good.
Thank you.
I'll leave you in the chat group.
Okay, great. And Jonathan, anything else?
Oh, just lots of thanks to the panelists and all the wonderful questions. They're all great questions, and I wish we could just sit here and go on chatting about it. Yeah, do send us more questions if okay. You want to.
I think the Economic Society is going to take you all up on that. Let me just conclude by saying that we can't answer all the questions about the new normal. I mean, clearly, what I take away is that across different sectors, different companies, and all that, there will probably be an acceleration of existing trends, but there will also be, as one of the panelists said, new behaviors, new products that come into the picture. And finally, we will need to adjust with a lot of big questions that are arising from this. Some of the differences in society, inequalities will be sharpened, and there needs to be a top-down policy response to this, empowering people through better education and so on. So there are a lot of questions. We can't answer everything, but I hope all of you have taken something away from it. I think, please, we can't, in a live setting, I would ask you all to applaud our panelists. I can't do that, but I'm sure all of you have appreciated the tremendous insights and also the valuable time that they have shared with us. So thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all the participants for your delightful questions. And let me hand you back to Danan, the MC. Thank you.
All right. Once again, a big thank you to our panel speakers for your insights, and thank you to participants for the fruitful session. We hope you enjoyed the Economic Society of Singapore's first webinar, and keep a lookout on our website for more upcoming webinars. Thank you, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.